welcome to the show. I'm Carson Scott. Coming up on Law TV today, a little bit of navel-gazing at the media itself and a number of assaults on the freedom of speech that are floating around today in the ether. The government eavesdropping through metadata retention laws and the like, all designed to, well, set to at least chill journalistic freedoms. You as a viewer, though, may also be in danger with what seems to be an imminent disbanding of anti-consolidation rules. So how are we going to be assured availability of diverse independent voices? Joining me today to pass through these issues, new Press Council Chairman David Weisbrot in our Sydney CBD studio. David, great to have you with us on the programme. Congratulations, firstly, on your appointment. In coming to it, what do you firstly see as, I suppose, the most important thing to reassert about the council itself, in the hearts and minds of the general public? What do you stand for?
Well, I think it's that we will independently and without fear and favour hold the media to account. The council has several different roles. One of them is to set standards for the media to abide by. And of course the media organisations are represented in and consulted in that effort. But then we handle complaints from members of the public where they allege that there has been a breach of those standards. And we have to do that quickly and well, so that the level of confidence in the media is maintained. And finally, we need to advocate for a free press wherever we feel that's in danger.
Well, let's touch on that last point and go into some more detail on it. You are steeped in policy-making experience. You are soaked in it, if you like. Now, when you reflect on the public debate that's raging over metadata, as much inside the media as going beyond that, how concerned are you at the broader impact of the proposals?
Extremely concerned. I've already issued a press release saying I was worried that the new metadata laws might tend to crush investigative journalism. That's very strong language, but I don't resile from that one bit. In terms of the tenor of your question, you're right that I have a long background in law reform. And if I look at this purely as a process issue before we get to the merits, I don't think you could do a worse job of handling this as a law reform matter. We've not really been told why a surveillance society is necessary to protect us from a handful of no doubt nefarious people who exist. It's a complete rewriting of the social contract we have with the government, where government's meant to keep off our unless there's some good, and law enforcement's meant to keep away unless there's some evidence that suggests we might be involved in wrongdoing. This flips everything, and I don't think we've had the kind of community debate or the informed debate that we need before a government should go, or Parliament should go ahead with this sort of major change in the way we operate in society.
Not least of all when it comes to the warrant procedure itself, the fact that that doesn't go more broadly outside the ambit of journalism, where data by other individuals and other professions is arguably going to prove telling in certain instances. That is to say, the likes of lawyers, accountants, doctors, those key professions not within the purview of that specific procedure when it comes to the warrants.
Absolutely right. And again, at the Law Reform Commission, at the Australian Law Reform Commission, when I was the head of that, we looked at issues of secrecy laws, of legal professional privilege, which is a privilege held, despite the name, privilege held by clients, not by lawyers. And we looked at issues of evidence and circumstances that a confidential communication maybe shouldn't be received in court, whether that's from a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, a domestic violence counselor, a psychiatrist, or whatever. And of course, most people, if you ask them, are very sensitive to those kind of issues and want good policy in that area, realize there's a trade-off between the public interests.
Should, to put it bluntly, these warrants be subject to appeal? In your estimation, before we move on, without getting bogged down in extra detail, but does that strike you as being rather perverse? that it's not?
I think the whole procedure is rather perverse. Journalists won't be there arguing. There'll be a public advocate who won't be talking to the journalists concerned, but will have to intuit what the issues are. They may not be sympathetic to it themselves, to the concerns of reporters. They may not anticipate what those concerns are. And also, in many cases, the police will have a case that a crime has been breached. For example, if a public servant is a whistleblower, there are penalties under various bits of federal legislation. If someone in a corporation is a whistleblower, no doubt there are contractual and criminal risks. So I think the public advocate can look at it and say to the judge, look, there is a risk of a crime being breached here. I don't think the media concern and the public interest concern in good investigative journalism is weighted sufficiently highly in the legislation.
It brings into question, alongside this, the settings when it comes to defamation law, and highlighted recently by the Hockey and Fairfax case that's been before the courts, is now subject to some decision into the future. Now, with that one pending, how concerned are you that, you know, the balance has swung, the pendulum has swung too far in favour of politicians? It's in their interest not to make amendments, and they have that capability, but resolve from doing so because it would put them on the back foot rather than where they currently are in a sweet spot.
That's true. I'm always very disappointed when politicians take defamation action. They can stand up in Parliament and, with the benefit of parliamentary privilege, their own viewpoint and restore their reputation or rebut allegations against them. Using the sledgehammer of defamation law, I think, is not a very good thing for democracy or for the law for journalism. The Hockey case hasn't finished yet, but if you take the Obeid case, where he successfully sued Fairfax for $1 million, and then later we realized that most or all of the allegations that were made by the Fairfax were correct. So I think we definitely need defamation law reform. I think we need something along the lines that they have in the U.S. of a public interest test, where there's a very high bar to succeed. You have to show that the media organization had actual malice, not that they got something wrong, but that they actually were out to get you and made things up. As you say, however, the problem is that law reform requires parliamentarians to change the law, and they don't seem quite disposed to doing that yet.
David, kind of a two-part to end on the notion of consolidation in the sector, which can't be ruled out as we now eye maybe changes to media ownership laws as being a possibility into the near future. How, in a consolidated environment, do you exercise overarching increased influence, or do you see that as a potential threat? And maybe to counter it, are you putting near the top of your agenda a fresh push on, say, approaching some of the digital entities that currently don't form part of the Press Council, the likes of The Guardian, the Daily Mail, for instance? Are they in your sights to get on board to shore up a base in the face of consolidation?
Absolutely, and even if consolidation wasn't a front-page story at the moment because of the comments about the communications minister's efforts, I think it's essential that we look at the changing media landscape. There's increasing use of online media. All of the major publishers, of course, have a significant online presence, but that's already captured by the Press Council. I think 7 of the top 10 online-only publishers are already members of the Press Council, but we'll be looking to increase that. I'm disappointed The Guardian isn't. It's a newspaper for which I have enormous regard, and I think we would all benefit from having them involved in our policy making and decision making. Would you agree that it's not exactly, though, advantageous to be getting, as has happened in the last week or so, a rejection by Fairfax on a ruling that the Press Council made just recently against it when it comes to the tugboat workers striking for a 40% rise? I appreciate it wasn't necessarily on your watch, but they are arguing that as a council, you shouldn't have been bothering yourself with this one, and
also you have failed to recognise, you know, that both sides of the dispute need to be considered when reaching a judgment.
Well, both sides were considered. That case, as you say, was before my time, but it went to a full adjudication. It went through the proper processes, both internal and external, and a result was reached. And in fact, the Fin Review did publish that adjudication, so while they thundered about it, they did abide by the rules of the press council that they had agreed to. We understand that it's a tough game. There are a lot of pressures on, that reporters and editors have a lot of pride in what they do, and I'm sure they don't like being told by outsiders that they've made an error or they could have done things better. But that's our role, and I think the public only will have confidence in the integrity of if there is that independent watchdog. We can't censor, and we never do, and we don't want that power. All we can do is to say, in a particular case, we find there was a breach of the council standards, and then that publication is required to put a note to that effect in their paper.
David, value all of those insights and opinions. Wish you well, and thanks for joining the programme.
Thank you very much, Carson. Pleasure.